Okay. Hello and welcome to the Environment and Climate Change Decision Meeting. I'm Councillor Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member. Start off with, I'm just going to do some housekeeping, which is the fire alarm sounds. I'm sure we've all heard this before, but it doesn't mean we can't have a refresher. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, evacuate the room, public gallery by the stairwells, don't attempt to use the lifts, and we assemble by the statue of Queen Victoria. Yeah, we all know that bit. And can I just draw everyone's attention to the fact that the meeting is live streamed? I don't think there's any deputations or expecting anything, so no. Okay, if I just do some introductions, we go that way around the table.
Hello, I'm Councillor George Fielding from the Labour Group.
Councillor Robert New from Copner Ward.
I'm Colette Hill, Assistant Director for Neighbourhoods.
John Smith, Democratic Services.
And hello to Fiona in the corner over there from the news. Okay, if we get onto the agenda then, no apologies for absence because everyone's here. Any declarations of members' interests? And it's a no from me as well. So if we go on to the third item, the charges at Household Waste and Recycling Centre. Colette's here to present, so over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashmore. The purpose of the report today is to seek approval from yourself to make two changes to policies used at the Household Waste and Recycling Centre at Port Solent, which I shall now refer to as the TIP, because it is a mouthful. These changes are to increase the price of a bag of soil and rubble, which also includes stonework, clay bricks, concrete blocks, paving slabs and ceramic units and tiles. And individual ceramic items such as a toilet pan by 50p to reflect the increased cost of disposing of this material and to keep charging in line with the rest of the HWRCs operated by Hampshire County Council and Southampton City Council. And the second change is to increase the price point at which individual items sold in the resale area of the TIP require labelling. So they only require labelling if they're over £5 currently, and this recommendation would be that they only require labelling if they're over £10. It should not change the value of the item, only the requirement for it to be labelled. So for some background, on the 1st of October 2016, Hampshire County Council introduced charges at their 24 HWRC sites for non-household items, including soil and rubble and plaster, board and asbestos. A decision was also made to implement the charging at the Portsmouth site to ensure that users were not diverted to Portsmouth from other sites in the county where charges were applied, just so that they could avoid paying the charges, as that would have increased the costs to Portsmouth City Council. And at the same time, Southampton City Council also introduced the charge for the same reason. They didn't want to have increased charges at their site. And that meant that from the 1st of October 2016, charges were applied at all HWRCs across Hampshire. The charges were set at a level that covered the costs of managing and disposing of these non-household waste types, and those charges haven't been changed since their introduction. The materials markets fluctuate, so the costs for disposal fluctuate, and due to a change in the composition of the material that people are disposing of, there has been a shift in the market. What's happened is there's a more rubble-based material being disposed of, which has a lower value and is therefore more expensive to dispose of. Veolia, the contractor, use a combination of outlets to achieve the best value solution whilst ensuring as much of the material is recycled as possible. And our Port Solent site has an average of 500 paying customers per month, and about 375 of those are Portsmouth residents. If I move on to the individual pricing for resale, so each of the 26 HWRC sites operated by Veolia on behalf of the county, Southampton and Portsmouth, have a resale area where items that are suitable for reuse can be displayed and sold to site users. And the benefit of this is this pushes those items up the waste hierarchy, and reuse is better than recycling. The sales area policy, which is attached to the HWRC contract, sets out the way in which the reuse areas at each of the sites are managed, and that includes a requirement for all items that are going to be sold for over £5 to be labelled. That requirement hasn't changed in almost 20 years, and in time the value of goods generally has changed, as has the type of things that residents dispose of at the HWRCs. So it's proposed that in recognition of the fact there have been no changes to the policy over the past 20 years and that goods have risen in value, the policy is amended to state that only items over £10 in value need to be individually labelled. And that will reduce the amount of time spent by site staff managing the resale area, but with no impact to the public, who'll continue to be able to negotiate the prices as they do currently. So it shouldn't change the price of something that's currently £6. It just means it won't need to have a label on it. So the reasons for the recommendations are that there have been no other price increases, for soil and rubble and the ceramic items charges. There have been no other price increases since charges were first introduced just 3 years ago. And this price only applies to the soil and rubble and ceramic items. It doesn't apply to plasterboard or asbestos. The price increase has been recently agreed at a meeting by Hampshire County Council, and Southampton City Council have also agreed it. So the price increase will be applied at all HWRC sites in Hampshire. And by increasing the charges in line with Hampshire and Southampton sites, we eliminate the risk that residents would travel to the Portsmouth site from the surrounding area to avoid the increased charges. We don't currently pay for any costs for this material stream, as it's not household waste, and if we didn't make this change, we would incur additional costs if the proposed price change is not implemented. With regard to the individual pricing of items for sale, as I've said I think twice already, this won't impact on the price of the items, but just the requirement to label them. So I have updated the equality impact assessment, which was completed when charges were previously increased. Whilst there is an impact on some groups who are on low incomes, most things that you take, most household waste you take to the tip is still free to get rid of, and these charges apply to a small number of items, and they're usually items which aren't disposed of on a regular basis, such as a toilet or a bag of rubble or tiles. The EIA has dealt with the legal advice is the EIA has dealt with what potential risks there are and how they're limited, and the government is looking at how charges for non-household waste are applied across the country at HWRC. So it may be, and they've been looking at it for quite a while though, but it may be that they bring some change forward in the future and that will require us to review this. The Director of Finance comments are that the proposed increase should meet the additional cost levied to the Council by the waste disposal contractor and will avoid the need to make savings elsewhere within the budget to meet that additional cost. He also notes that if we didn't increase the charges in line with Southampton and Hampshire, we could see an increase in the amount of those chargeable items disposed of at our own site and therefore increase our costs. And the change to the price point of an item should have no financial impact. And so the recommendations are that the Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change approves an increase in the charge to users for a bag of soil and rubble or other individual ceramic items disposed of at the HWRC by 50 pence to £3 to reflect the increase in costs associated with the management and disposal of this material, and also to ensure that that charging is kept in line with Hampshire County Council and Southampton City Council sites, which are all managed under the same contract. That the Cabinet Member also approves a change to the price point at which an item be sold for reuse at Household Waste and Recycling Centre, so that the individual labels only apply to items over £10. And that the Director for Housing, Neighbourhood and Building is given delegated authority to be used in consultation with the Cabinet Member to agree future changes to the charges for non-household waste at the household waste recycling centres to ensure that the City Council can respond rapidly in partnership with Hampshire County Council and Southampton City Council to keep with the contract timescales which are set down, and also to avoid additional cost burdens associated with any delays. Okay.
Thank you very much, Colette. So it's fair to say this is almost like an inflationary rise, a reluctant rise, but it's in keeping with the costs that have been imposed upon us and the fact that the charge is there, and if we don't do it, everyone else will anyway.
Yeah, so the contract allows for the contractor to recover the cost. So there's no cost to us, but there's also should be a cost neutral exercise for the contractor. And because the makeup of the soil and rubble that's coming through, and also because of market changes, it's meant that really they're making a loss now, and that's not what we've agreed with them in the contract. So they've applied the change of rate.
Thank you. And it's worth reiterating that the individual labelling from £5 to £10 doesn't affect the price of the products there. It's just when they start getting priced. Okay, any comments, questions, observations from councillors? Councillor New.
A comment and a question. I completely agree that we have to increase the prices. It's sensible, as what any business would do, to stay in line so that we don't then incur charges elsewhere from other people coming to us thinking that we are the cheaper and easier solution. So my question really that I raised last time at our briefing is around the authority being given over to the Director for Housing to be able to set the price changes. While I appreciate, like, what you were saying about, being able to respond to it rapidly so that we don't incur additional costs, and it does say it's in consultation with the Cabinet member, how will that differ from, say, for example, if that was to happen again in the future in the current setup where it has to come to a decision meeting, because you could always call an emergency decision meeting, what are the timescales involved, etc., because I'm just not clear on that. And I suppose for the sake of democracy and people at home, I'm just always a bit more reluctant to give and to cede authorities that should lie with the Cabinet over to officers, because there's already a feeling, I believe, don't take this personally, Claire, because you're great, that officers already have too much control and run the show and to do things behind politicians' back, not saying exclusively in Portsmouth, but just as a generalisation. And so it just makes me feel uneasy that a director could potentially change the price point with just a brief conversation with a Cabinet member and then move forward. And while I'm not against the principle of it, I just would like some clarification around why that would be beneficial over holding an emergency decision meeting, for example, which, as we've seen in the past in other portfolios, we're able to do at very short notice should we need to, especially if it's going to incur costs.
So the reason I put that in the report was because in the contract it's a 5-day notice that they give us with, and it has to be evidenced. They can't just say, oh, we're going to put it up by 50p or whatever. It has to be evidenced, so they produce a report for us. Southampton haven't taken it through in this way. They've used the contract as the way to make the decision. Hampshire have also said that they'll do delegated authority, so that they can make the decision more quickly than this one's been able to be made. So we would end up in a 2-tier kind of, we might have a lower charge at our sites while they've made the change, whereas we've tried to coordinate the change this time so that we're all doing it from the same time. But that's just why I've done it, but it's not my decision, so I'll leave that.
So realistically, I mean, how long, Joanne, does it take to organise an emergency decision meeting? 7 days, if that public notice has to go out?
We have to give due notice, 5 clear days. But
so only 5 clear days. So
availability of members, but it's
so potentially 10 days. So realistically, the cost is going to be minimal. I just feel a bit uncomfortable with that delegated authority. It's only my opinion, and obviously it's your decision to make, Chair. But I think it would be right to speak out on that. That I think that the authority should reside ultimately with you through a formal public decision meeting.
Okay, no, I think you're right to bring that up. For transparent openness, but it is written to say in consultation with the Cabinet member. So I get what you're saying, but it's not like I've just, or if I agree to this, it's not like I'm just saying officers set the price. I don't need to know about it. They can. It's always going to be in consultation. So Yeah, but you're right to raise it. Sorry.
We can also report via MIS once the decision's been made, and then it could be called in, I think, can't it? Yeah.
So you have that democratic, what do you call it, safeguard around it. You can always call it in. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Okay then, well thanks for that. Thanks for the report, Colette. Okay, having read through it and having had that discussion about that and hearing the reasons why, I'm happy to accept these recommendations. So, thank you very much. I think that was the only item on the agenda, wasn't it? Yeah, so thank you very much for coming everyone, and I close the meeting.